Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure to welcome you to this side event organized by UNIDIR. I'm Giacomo Persipaoli. I am the head of the Security and Technology program here at UNIDIR, actually in Geneva. And it's my pleasure to welcome you whether you're joining us online or in person here in New York. This event is meant to do fundamentally two things. One is to share with you our latest work that kind of gives the name to the event itself, Unpacking Cyber Capacity Building Needs. But also it provides us an opportunity to hear from many distinguished delegations that are sitting next to me who had the opportunity to review the report, how the work that we've done could potentially be used in practice, what kind of added value it brings. Before we get into the presentation of the report itself and the interventions, I just wanted to give the floor to Matthew Brown here on my left, who will be making some opening remarks on behalf of the UK. That is one of the co-sponsors of this study, along with the sponsors of the Security and Technology Program, the Czech Republic, France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, Switzerland, and Microsoft. Apologies, a long list. I always afraid of forgetting someone. So, Matthew, over to you.
Thank you, Giacomo. And thank you to UNIDIR and your colleagues for all of the work on this project and this report and these reports. I spoke in March about the reasons the UK had supported this work, so I won't repeat those. I'll focus just briefly on what we see as some of the advantages of this work and how it relates to the trends that we're seeing in the open-ended working group. On advantages, I'd say the first one is that you've worked with us on this. So part of the context for this report is there were a series of interviews with a broad range of actors and agencies that work in this area, but including diplomats to the open-ended working group. And that gives real value, we feel, in shaping the recommendations for how we approach delivering the norms, particularly under the threats heading. And on threats, I suppose reflect on one of the trends that we're seeing in the open-ended working group this week and in our last meetings in March and May is one, it continues to be a very long and important discussion. We had a whole day yesterday. When we spoke in March at the beginning of this, I reflected on the importance of ransomware as a threat and the interest of our group in looking to address it, and that has only increased now as we're in July and we've seen some major instances of ransomware with very destabilizing effects in that time. And so I think this report and its recommendations for capabilities in addressing that threat is more relevant even than we thought it would be at the outset. And then on threats more broadly, I think the recommendation from Kenya on a threats repository is very valuable and worth exploring, and it exposes the importance of a kind of threat information sharing that is different to cert channels or the technical information sharing, but it's about enabling whole of government and diplomatic colleagues to understand and respond to the threat. And we hope to see information sharing channels taken forward, and as that happens, recommendations such as these for responding to, addressing and preventing those threats with reference to the framework will become more important and relevant. And so again, I think that this project will have enduring importance for us. And then when we come to the discussion, I think the thing that the UK will be really interested to hear as a sponsor of this project is what ultimate outputs will be most useful to other states. So we have these reports, and there's plans for videos, I think, and documents to help us address the gaps in norm implementation. But any other thoughts on how best this project can service our needs as diplomats and representatives of governments will be of extraordinary value. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew, for your kind and encouraging words. It's true that we were here in March in a room just next door to present you the preliminary findings of the study that, all in all, we delivered in just over 6 months. So for UN timeline, this is a relatively quick turnaround, I have to say. So we're very proud of what we have accomplished, and we hope that the report was launched on Thursday last week. So perhaps some of you had already the opportunity to skim it. If not, we will be it's on our website, and we will be sharing the link with you if you so wish. So in terms of a few just introductory remarks from my side as well. Why did we do this project? So the background of this project really is rooted on the need that many states have expressed to receive more guidance on how they can implement the various elements of the framework of responsible state behavior in cyberspace, whether we're talking about norms, whether we're talking about CBMs or international law. And this appetite for more guidance has been kind of captured in different ways, shapes, and forms, either in national statements or in the reports that have been generated by the OEWG in the past. So there are already different initiatives or by national governments or regional organizations that have been looked into providing additional guidance. And when we asked, together with the UK, what can we do to contribute to this discussion, we thought that it would be useful to establish what would be a foundational layer of capabilities that states who are interested in implementing the framework should really try to achieve. So this project is the foundation, is the floor, is not the ceiling. But we are hoping that by creating what could be a baseline or a foundational layer that states can aspire to achieve, we will then provide an opportunity for states to build on top of that. Because the goal of the project is really not to highlight what are the best practices or the ideal way of implementing. That is dependent on so many different factors, national factors, regional factors, resources available, etc., that we really wanted to focus on foundational cyber capabilities. And we wanted to do so in two different ways. One, by looking at the different elements of the framework of responsible state behavior. But also, as Matthew mentioned, we wanted to look specifically at the links that exist between the framework of responsible state behavior and specific threats that we see are increasingly being flagged by you as threats of concern. So in addition to having, if you want, a more general set of foundational cyber capabilities to implement the framework, we also looked at what we call the threat-based approach. So if your entry point is not one norm, but is ransomware, how can you use and leverage the framework of responsible state behavior to increase your cyber resilience against ransomware? And what would that mean, and what kind of foundational capabilities would you need? And one of the benefits of this approach is that it also provides us with an additional entry point to help states better understand the links that exist between threats, between the framework, and between capacity building. Now, there are plenty of very successful models out there that states can use to assess their general or overall cyber maturity, whether it is, there's the Oxford model, the ITU has its own survey related to the Global Cyber Stability Index, UNIDIR has a survey on national implementation. So there is no shortage of tools that you can use to understand where you are as a starting point. However, none of these is specifically tailored to the elements of the framework, and this is where we're coming into. Next slide, please. So, this is we're a research institute, so indulge me if I spend 30 seconds explaining how we got to the point and to the findings that we're presenting today. We, of course, did significant desk review of all the sorts of primary and secondary sources. There is a lot of guidance that was already being provided in the previous GGE, in the OEWG, in national statements, in other documents that we have consulted. We've done several interviews with representatives from different member states and organized 2 workshops, including one here in March last year. The outputs, originally we thought we were going to summarize everything into one report. That turned out to be not possible because of the wealth of knowledge that we had, we found ourselves, and we wanted to really give credit to both of the elements. So to facilitate your access to the information, we decided to split into these 2 reports. You can scan the QR code, or you can go on our website. They look the same, but the color is different. So you make sure, this is building on lessons learned from the past. We have made it slightly different, so you realize that they're not the same thing. Nevertheless, I encourage you to go through them. Today, in the interest of time, we won't be able to give you the full presentation of everything, otherwise we would need it 6 hours. But just some illustrative examples that hopefully will help you get in there. And with that, I give the floor to my colleague Samuele, that will take you through the first part. Samuele.
Thank you, Giacomo. So let me go through the next slide. In terms of the foundational cyber capabilities, we look at the framework of responsible state behavior, composed of the 11 voluntary norms, international law, confidence building measures, underpinned by capacity buildings. And so stemming from those elements, we identified the so-called foundational cyber capabilities. So the foundational cyber capabilities are defined as a combination of policy and regulation, processes and structures, partnership and networks, people and skills and technology. And this constitutes more or less the framework, the pillar through which we analyze how to implement the framework. In particular, we understood the policy and regulation as official document related to cybersecurity matters, including member states' strategies or signatories of international or regional agreements. For structure and processes, we consider key position, agencies, entities, or other national or regional mechanism and official procedure, processes, protocol related to cybersecurity. With partnership and networks, we look at initiative, both the domestic and international level, aimed at strengthening national capacity, for example, through intergovernmental cooperation. For people and skills, we consider knowledge and expertise related to cybersecurity, and we also acknowledge that certain foundational cyber capabilities that we listed and we identified could be met also by outsourcing and establishing agreements with external providers and other stakeholders. Same applies for technology, for which we intended national level technical solution and capabilities pertaining to cybersecurity. So I won't go again to the points that Giacomo made concerning these foundational cyber capabilities, which again are like baseline. It's a list, and it's not a closed list, because additional elements can be added with the development of the framework. I just want to highlight and underline that our capabilities focus on the what instead of the how, meaning that we emphasize what should be present more than how it should be developed. This remains like a prerogative to member states, and this is also in line with the principle identified by the OEWG for what concerns capacity building. So, as an illustrative example on how these foundational cyber capabilities work with a component of the framework, we took norm D, which goes like states should consider how to best cooperate to exchange information, assist each other, prosecute terrorist and criminal use of ICTs, and implement other cooperative measures to address such threats. So, what foundational cyber capabilities member states should have to implement this norm? And in the interest of time, we are going to look only to 2 pillars: policy and regulation, and structure and processes. So, in terms of policy and regulations, we identified that member states need, first of all, a national interpretation of the norm, and here member states can elaborate on their views, and in particular on certain concepts that are contested or might have like different interpretations, such as terrorist use of ICTs. And additionally, is recommended that member states sign bilateral, regional, multilateral instruments on cybercrime, because they allow for timely and effective mechanism to cooperation among states. Moreover, concerning the more operational aspects of the norm, it's important that member states adopt policy outlining mechanism or procedures to cooperate, to exchange information, including with the private sector. So it's also important to foster cooperation, that the cybercrime legislation adopt a technology-neutral approach to remain in line with technological developments. In terms of structure and processes, it's important, in considering the focus of the norm, that member states have a mechanism to respond and to send requests for assistance. And given the fact often these requests for assistance also involve the exchange of or transfer of data, it's also very, it's key that these data are transferred in a way that then can be used in, for investigation or prosecution, and eventually they can also constitute evidence in a court. So in light of this, setting up protocols and procedures to collect, handling and storing digital evidence is very important. Of course, it's key to have cyber law enforcement capacity, and an example could be establishing cyber police units. And last but not least, having a CCERT is also relevant to identify, documenting, and reporting finding of malicious use of ICTs. I also would like to highlight certain elements, components of the framework that we deem transversal and cross-cutting, and so they always apply. One of them is Norm A, under which general requirements underpinning interstate cooperation are listed, as well as for Norm E, that focuses on the respect and protection of human rights. In addition to this, building on what has been affirmed in the OEWG 2021 report, capacity building should respect human rights and fundamental freedoms, be gender sensitive and inclusive, universal and non-discriminatory. We deem transversal that when member states implement capabilities identified in the framework, should consider how these may affect gender dimension differently, including how they can impact gender gaps among cyber professionals, or how the responses to malicious ICT Act can affect, may have gender dimensions involved. One last point before giving the floor back to Giacomo for the second part. During this research phase on foundational cyber capabilities, we identified key capabilities that are the most recurrent ones in all the components of the framework. And these are the national strategy policy, dedicated entity for cyber matters, the CERT or CCERT, cooperation with relevant stakeholders, and access to specialized skills. So we reckon that if member states start, or at least develop these capabilities, may be also advantaged in the implementation of the entire framework. And yeah, that's how we imagine it. So that was all from my side, and I now give back the floor for the second part. Thank you.
Thanks, Samuele. So basically, the whole concept of of breaking down this concept of foundational cyber capabilities into the five, if you want, pillar of policy and regulation, structure and processes, partnerships and networks, people and skills, and technology, is really, we needed that sort of framework to be able to organize and make the information somewhat digestible. However, all of these elements are really interconnected, right? So everyone says that it's great to be able to exchange information with partners. Now, in order for you to be able to exchange that information exchange has to be allowed by your national law. Otherwise, it doesn't matter how good it is and how relevant it would be, you simply can't do it. So it is important not only to focus on specific elements, but also on how these elements are dependent and building on each other. And this is particularly true when we are taking a more kind of a when we are taking the threat-based approach, where we're no longer looking at elements of the framework in isolation, but we're looking at how the framework as a whole can be leveraged to prevent, mitigate, or respond to specific cyber threats. So the threat-based approach is basically summarized in the 3 steps that you see on the slide. So the first, I'm just checking that, the online colleagues cannot see the slides. I'm just wondering if the colleagues in the IT booth can please help to make sure that the slides are shareable. Thank you. In the meantime, I'll just explain the 3 steps. Fundamentally, it starts with conducting a national threat assessment or risk assessment of based on what are the threats that as a state you feel you're most exposed to. Now, there is no single way in which you can do this national threat assessment. We have flagged on the slide the taxonomy that we actually released exactly 1 year ago on the 25th of July of last year. This is a taxonomy that we have created to help states break down malicious ICT acts, and that can be a useful tool for you to think about what is your national threat assessment. Once you have identified what are your priority threats, you take them one by one and you analyze based on the different elements of the framework, what are those that are applicable, that are most relevant. And then within those, you can identify specific foundational cyber capabilities and see how, how aligned your current capabilities are to what you should aspire to have. Let's look at a specific example that might be easier to digest. So in this case, we are looking at a specific incident that occurred, and that we want to test this threat-based approach using a specific incident. So here's the threat profile that I do hope that colleagues online can see now. Yes, they can. Perfect. So we're talking about a distributed denial of service as a type of attack. The victim or the target are government websites and applications of a country that we named Alpha. There is a cross-border dimension because the attacks have been routed through multiple servers hosted in 2 different countries. And when it comes to the perpetrator, we know there is evidence pointing towards an advanced persistent threat with plausible involvement of a state actor. So this is a relatively common threat profile that we can see. If we look at the next slide, please. If we look at, what would this look like in practice? So let's say that country Alpha suffered a prolonged campaign of multiple DDoS attacks targeting its public services. Early investigations of the incident highlighted that the malicious acts were routed through the computers and networks in 2 other countries. And given as these attacks increased in frequency and magnitude, country Alpha declared a state of emergency. Additional investigations by country Alpha authorities linked these malicious acts to a known advanced persistent threat closely associated with the government of a 3rd country with competing strategic interests that we named country 0. So in this context, how can we use the framework? How can different states, involved in this scenario, use the framework to respond, mitigate, or prevent this type of threat? Next slide, please. So first and foremost, we're looking at different norms. What are the elements? So we have norm B. So in this scenario, the combination of the routing of the attacks through 3rd countries and the potential involvement of an APT associated with another state, really make the norm B, which is the norm on attribution and calling for considering all relevant information before making an attribution, particularly relevant for country alpha. I'm not going to go through those that we say already are always relevant, which is norm A and norm E, in the interest of time. When it comes to norm C, now norm C is the norm that says that states should do everything they can to prevent the misuse of ICT in their territory. Now, this norm is particularly relevant to the transit countries who are playing a key role in, who will have to play a key role in the disruption of the attack. We now go to norm D, that is relevant to all the countries here. Because norm D, which is the norm that Samuele just explained later, is the norm that calls for cooperation in the disruption of criminal and terrorist use of ICTs, and so on and so forth. So there are different components of the framework can be highlighted as being particularly relevant to this scenario. Next slide. Again, in the interest of time, we're not going to go through all of the pillars, but if we look at policies and regulations. Well, policies and regulations, let's start with why should countries have a national interpretation of the different components of the framework, so the norm B, C, D, and international law? Because this provides, as a transparency and confidence building measure, provides a foundational layer upon which specific responses can be built. There are several policies in addition that countries should have adopted or implemented depending on the role they play in this scenario. Norm B on attribution, of course, country alpha as the victim country should have developed a classification of ICT incidents in terms of scale and impact that could underpin and justify their declaration of national state of emergency, as well as a policy on attribution that could potentially explain their definitions and methodology. Other examples, norm C is particularly relevant for transit countries, which should have cybersecurity policies and strategies that outline clear provisions to prevent, detect, and interrupt malicious ICT acts, supported by an adequate legislative framework to investigate and prosecute these acts. And of course, last but not least, all countries involved should also have established regulation and a legal framework that allows for cooperation and information exchange with relevant commercial and other non-governmental entities that can be the technical community or other. We cannot really wait until there is the need to share information to solve a crisis to realize that there is no legal framework that allows us to do that. So it's really important to have these components in place. Next. No, we're going to go into this. In the interest of time, we can explain more in detail later if you have more questions, but I really want to save time for our speakers to share their perspectives on this effort and what they think about it. What I wanted to conclude on is really to give you a sense of where we would like to go from here. Samuel already said this is a living project. We have started today with sharing with you our first list of foundational cyber capabilities, but as the understanding of how to implement it will evolve, this can be further refined and improved. But going from here, we're now working in August on launching a series of what we called foundational cyber capabilities and then threat cards that will kind of summarize in a more digestible way than a 52-page report the information that we have. That will include on one side all of the official guidance that has been provided over the course of the years by the different processes, and on the other side will include our own recommendations of how to actually put that guidance into practice. As well as for the threats, it will include kind of the comprehensive overview of what I just discussed now. Matthew mentioned also the videos. We're planning also to launch a series of introductory videos that can basically explain how to use these tools for your own benefits. We just heard today that thanks to the cooperation with the OAS, the 2 reports have been translated in Spanish. We just saw the drafts today. So we're just working on the design, and as soon as possible, they will be released in Spanish as well. And I'm looking forward to potential other cooperations that would allow us to translate these reports in other UN official languages as well. We've tried to do that internally in the past. The problem we have is always about quality assurance of the translations. So it's better if we find an institutional partner with whom we can take on this task. So if you want to volunteer, or if you have any brilliant ideas of how to do that, please come to see us. And then last but not least, these tools are only as impactful as they can be used in practice. So our hope is that following this first phase of the study, there will be appetite both from potential recipient countries, but also potential donor countries to support a more implementation-focused phase that will help us take this framework in countries and work together with recipient governments to assess the implementation of the framework and what can be done, and design together a roadmap that can, in time, help states improve their implementation efforts. With that, I'm going to stop now, and I'm going to very happily give the floor to the great speakers that we have here around the table, starting with Daniela Ruiz Dominguez on my left, who is the Director for Cybersecurity and Conventional Weapons at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Mexico. Daniela, please.
Thank you, Giacomo. Thank you very much, also Samuele, for this invitation to Mexico. Well, actually, last month, in a meeting among friends, it came up this idea of the need to improve and emphasize the understanding on how implementation of the framework will look like, and of course, including to dedicated guidance, assistance, and dedicated capacity building efforts. So we're very glad to see this effort you've put together. Thank you very much for it. Very looking forward to see the Spanish version, of course, and the cards will be very useful to improve and to keep the dissemination of this information, of course. So I will stress about some key elements that we found from our national capacity and that we found most interesting in terms of improving the understanding of the framework as a whole. So of course, building on developing skills and having an appropriate tools has been a cross-cutting priority for us. For Mexico, capacity building entails an important priority, and it's an area we've been putting special attention, given the diversity of needs we face at the national but also regional levels. So I would like to recognize the importance and relevance of the Unpacking cyber capacity building needs for identifying and prioritizing these particular issues in our national context. The report we found, it provides an invaluable resource for understanding foundational cyber capabilities, as you just presented. This will also help us to recognize the capacities that must be built across multiple dimensions, including, of course, policy and strategy, education, training, but also legal and regulatory frameworks in our different countries. We recognize the intrinsic importance of the 5 pillars you just identified in the report for the implementation of the framework. From our national experience, all 5 pillars have been playing an important role and a key role in developing and enhancing the understanding of the norms. and we stress particular importance of having in place processes, also structures, but also partnerships and networks. And I will refer particularly to this partnership and networks, not just within our national authorities, but also in the regional level. It's been a key element to develop a regional CBMs framework within, of course, the OAS partnership. Last October, during the 4th meeting of this regional working group on CBMs, we were able to agree on new confidence building measures regarding cyber diplomacy, gender, applicability of international law, also the work with the stakeholders, the implementation of the voluntary non-binding norms as well, and also the implementation of our national cyber incidents schema. So this is to stress the importance of having in place these networks and building around these networks. And of course, we're also very interested in keep building and strengthening our collaboration with private sector in particular, but also other stakeholders. We do recognize them as a key element for the whole cyberspace ecosystem. And of course, this is a proof it helps and it's giving us gains, right? Also, we found very interesting the potential implications of this report regarding the identifying capacity building requirements. Significant, yes, and by adopting the report threat-based approach, as you just were explaining, Giacomo, we foresee already advantages to better assess our cybersecurity needs and prioritize interventions accordingly. You were just mentioning about this, conducting national cybersecurity risk assessments. We do see added value in stressing importance and in this element. Of course, it will help us in conducting these risk assessments. We foresee it will enhance as well our national cybersecurity strategy and our implementation and comprehensive legal framework of the norms of cybersecurity that is aligned to the multilateral process we're of course conducting at the UN framework. And also, of course, in our regional level, we do see this connection with the regional and multilateral components as intrinsic. Finally, I do believe that the tailor-based approach you're proposing, praised in the report, is a way to go for us. At least it works for Mexico. The benefits of building a more robust foundational cyber capability cannot be overstated. For Mexico, this could translate very easily into enhanced national security, but also we do see gains in our economic growth, social development, and also improving Mexico's abilities to cooperate internationally on cybersecurity and cyber diplomacy areas. And also, I do believe that we have to take advantage of our close relationship with the stakeholders. As I already mentioned, they're interested in advancing capacity in this all arena. I do believe this document also opens the door for us to foster multi-stakeholder dialogue on cybersecurity, cyber capacity building, involvement of industry, academia, civil society. I mean, a whole range of stakeholders. And yeah, well, thank you very much for this work you put together.
Thank you, Daniela, for your kind words and plenty of reflections, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to move to the speakers on my right, and also would like to save some time for the audience. Gabriela Gonzalez, who's the DPR here, the permanent mission of Uruguay to the UN here in New York.
Well, thank you very much to you for convening this meeting. Yeah, thank you, the authorities of UNIDIR, Giacomo, and team for convening this meeting. It's a pleasure for me to share the opportunity of the presentation, to be here to the presentation of this amazing, I had to say, report that in our case, we have many common grounds with the colleague of Mexico that she have said before. We are working on regional basis with the iOS. It's very good. We have a very good experience in the regional level. We have certain programs. We are working with the Cert2E since 15 years ago. That has been very good. And without the work of the partners, the regional agencies, and institutes like yours, it would be more difficult for countries like Uruguay. It's not that we don't have the potential. We have it. We have an agency in our case. Our numbers in the region are one of the best. We are first in LATAM in digital government, fifth in American Global Security Index. We are the first in government AI Intelligence Reading Index. We are first in LATAM in Open Data Barometer. We are member of the Digital Nations. We are working in this agenda for a long, long time. So national level, we have people, we have to say, I'm very proud to say that Uruguay, most of the population, 99% have internet. You said we have access, the government, it's all digital. So we are proud of the work we have done in national level. But now we have the other step. The cybersecurity agenda was included in another frame of digital security agenda, in a digital one. No. So when I started to work in this matter, it called my attention that we didn't have that separate. So all the work that you have been done on providing documents, and my expert who is from the other side working in the national level, bring me to this matter that we need to work together on all the work we're going to do here and see the implementation at national level. Because as you say, we're working in the GTA, in the OEWG, at the GGE for many years. Uruguay is being member on some of their GGE. We are working in the creation of the no binding norms. And of course, since we are in the agenda, I was saying yesterday, cybersecurity is in 1998, we're in the whole process. But also now we have to advance, move, and then how to implement this norm. I think it's a challenge for each country. Because I think, to be honest, in all national level, I've been talking with a partner here because these meetings, the UNIDIR meetings, the OEWG, let us talk and do networking with other agencies and see the reality in other regions. So most of what I see, what I have heard, and probably you in your research for this work, it's like we have to work to make the fusion between two areas. Even I was working with a very known country that is also a donor for your program, and they say, we have an issue now. We are working to fusion both strategy, the national and also the one that is taking care of the international law, the international law, and also the cyber diplomacy. So for that, when I read your as a national level, we start to work in a strategy that, first of all, individualize which partner we could have. And you are one of them, because we have some previous meeting, and we have also been working with a bilateral level to see how we can have also help from donors and, an exercise. It's not that just to give me. We can help you too to show how a state is also responsible. In our case, we are not in the escalation of a war, or perhaps till now not in a conflict and not receive an attack that many countries internationally have been. But we have, yes, a lot of ransomware and other incidents happen inside, even at entities in our infrastructure, that we have to take care of them. So when I see the report, and I read it twice as I comment before, that thank you for sending me the advanced edition, it's very easy to be read and understand. It's not complicated for people who are engineers, They work in another matter. They're on cyber. When the other side, sometimes she used some certain norms that I was asking. I don't understand. And then we have yesterday, I had to explain some things. Because my field is this. And I think this is an amazing job. I will take advantage of it because this make my job easier to work with my partners at the agency, as I will be very happy to work with you in one of these programs in the next step. I'm happy to have UK as a donor if they're happy with that. I had to talk with my capital and agencies because I think it would help us to see if we're in the same, because also we are working, that in the cyberspace, that is the reason that we are in the OEWG, that we don't have abiding norms or regulations. So sometimes we use from the frames from the EU, most of them, in cybercrime by working with Budapest. But then we have the convention, the international convention. It's difficult sometimes because they are different teams. Our job, it's like coordinate, that is everything in the same phase. And this is very important because we have a contradiction. I had to tell you that when I start to work on this matter, we have like 5 projects at the parliament. We take this very seriously. If you open the newspaper, I don't know what's going on, but cyber is a matter of the politician today. And for that reason, I was very happy that the director of the agency announced that we are working on a new strategy. It's going to be specific on cyber, not included in the digital agenda. And so probably we're going to have the 5 M's because we were in the 4. And in this process, I think it will be very important to have the expertise of the partner, and this, from our point of view, is going to help our job. I think the way and the section that you found, that policy and regulation, structure, partnership, networking, people and skill and technology, more or less, it's the way that I saw that, because when you see in one part that we have to also prepare people to work in this, I had to tell from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we have to improve our team on cyber diplomacy. So I have work in the house to do, that is prepare and have a better team and more prepared. Also work with the civil society to be included and involved in this matter. But I'm talking about private sector because they have their own cybersecurity in the networking in the private sector. Also, we were thinking from here, include in the programs of the universities, because even you see that most of universities in the US and the Western Hemisphere, you have already cyber diplomacy courses in international affairs, even PhD. We still don't have it in my region. And we are a very alphabetized society with a very high records of registration universities. So I think all these things that you are doing, and even the side events that we are having, make us think to improve, and I think it's an excellent way to make our state more safe and a better use of the cyberspace. That is what we want at the end, and make for our population. That is the final objective and goal of everything. But really, and the mapping, the second part, giving the example, the cases are very well explained, and so I think it's not that you have like a document that is difficult to digest, that is 100 pages. It's simple, clear, and can work everybody who is on board on this matter. So I'm very happy to have this opportunity, go on working, and I would love to have the confirmation from Capital that we can move forward if you do the next step. So, volunteeri. Thank you very much.
No, thank you for the kind words. We did have a document that was 100 pages long, and we decided to split it in 2. So now we have 2 that is 50 pages. No, but thank you so much for the kind words, and I'm glad you think it's accessible and useful, because that was our number 1 priority. I just would like to give the floor now to Eva Ntoki, the counselor from the Permanent Mission of Kenya here to the UN in New York. Eva, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. So I join in thanking all the organizers and UNIDIR for organizing this event and also for the invitation. And to Samuele and Giacomo, thank you for the work you've put into this report and providing us an overview of the findings. I'd also like to thank the distinguished speakers who preceded me. Your observations and recommendations are truly insightful. I am a strong believer that capacity building is a two-way endeavor. So thank you for those insights. So Kenya is a highly digitized country known for its silicon savannah and technological innovation. We can attest to the importance of cyberspace as an essential domain for communication, social development, delivery of public services, and economic growth. The two-part report we are considering today provides a good starting point to identify the necessary cyber-related capacities and capabilities to prevent and mitigate the impact of cyber threats effectively. So the threat-based approach is really welcome and key. The report also usefully identifies a non-exhaustive foundational cyber capability list, which in my view motivates us to broaden the scope of cyber training. It particularly underscores the usefulness of equipping a diverse set of stakeholders, including but not limited to tech experts. Of course, each of the FCC elements needs to be unpacked and nationally interpreted and tailored to align with the context, vision, strategies, and priorities of individual countries. In 2022, Kenya established the National Cybersecurity Strategy. It aims at providing a unified approach in the implementation of cybersecurity and is guided by 6 pillars, one of them being cybersecurity, capacity building, and capability. So I'll touch on the 5 pillars of the report and try to quickly link them to how my country is implementing or could apply them to enhance our implementation efforts. So first, on people and skills. Kenya's Silicon Savannah has nurtured a vibrant tech ecosystem that prioritizes on inclusivity and innovation to support our youth and tech entrepreneurs. We've witnessed the benefits of investing in the education training of our cyber workforce, developing the skills of expertise for our citizens, and creating a knowledgeable and skilled base to safeguard our digital space. However, the question is, how do we ensure collaborative expertise? Addressing cyber incidents and implementing policies often requires a blend of very specialized skill sets. So, for example, tackling cyber crimes related to cryptocurrencies may demand legal, diplomatic, and technical expertise. The challenge, it's a capacity question. The challenge lies in bringing these distinct capabilities together seamlessly to address such incidents or implement a specific policy. Second, on policies and regulations, Kenya's 2019 National Information Communications and Technology ICT policy recognized the necessity of ensuring ICT products, services, and opportunities are inclusive and accessible, including for persons with disabilities. This required assistive technology capacities to ensure that persons with disabilities are not only able to access products and services, but that they do it also safely. So third, on processes and structures, Kenya's whole government approach to cybersecurity policies issues has seen the establishment of a dedicated committee of the National Computer and Cyber Crimes Coordination Committee, what we call the NC4. It's an intergovernmental agency collaborating regularly on cyber-related matters. And also in our quest to secure our cyberspace, we have also established a National Kenya Computer Incident Response Team. Identification of what constitutes critical infrastructure, as the example you just walked us through, is also a capacity issue. So Kenya's 2022 Gazette Notice outlines key critical sectors, critical services, and associated system and information infrastructures. This is an ecosystem that requires collaborative efforts and different capacity training. So this report is really useful in terms of looking at it from different angles. In terms of partnerships and networks, this play a vital role, as Gabriela just indicated, and also a colleague from Mexico, in cybersecurity. Kenya, we've committed to implement the Malabo Convention, which speaks to partnership and fostering of bilateral, regional, and multilateral cooperation. It's an important tool, especially for strengthening foundational cyber capabilities of developing countries and less technologically advanced states. And so lastly, on technology, Technology remains a critical component of foundational cyber capabilities. We must also be cognizant that technology is emerging and developing differently in different contexts. For example, in Kenya, we have our M-Pesa, our renowned mobile phone-based transfer service. This comes with its own vulnerabilities that perhaps the existing global norms may not directly address. Capacity building needs to adapt to such contextual challenges, for us being that financial engineering for this specific issue. The last two decades have also seen few tech giants drive the cyber agenda. The tendency, and here I'll just be very honest about this, is driven by this dependency on the tech companies. And countries tend not to invest too much on infrastructure and skills because it's a service that companies or individuals can pay for. However, a note of caution is that there's an importance of investing in domestic ICT infrastructure, industries, and skills, particularly when you think about it in terms of building domestic capacity and also building resilience. So, for example, how can countries, including developing countries, have the opportunities to frequently practice and apply the skills we are talking about today or the capacities we are talking about today if the technology and infrastructure belongs and comes from elsewhere, and also without having access to the cyber threat landscape as it is? So just as an example, too, what if Google is withdrawn or hacked today? How many countries can be able to immediately revive or have a backup, and continue to function? So this is also a capacity and a capability issue in terms of just reinforcing the fact that capacity building needs to shift and prioritize on enhancing independent domestic technological environments to enable countries to defend against cyber threats, even if external services are disrupted or compromised. And that, for us, is really the true meaning of national cybersecurity. So again, the report is quite useful in pushing us to delve deeper, not only on the what, but the how. The only thing I would add as an important FCC or baseline is perhaps measurability tools. This will assist countries to gauge where they are in terms of capacity building and norm implementation effectively. So I thank you for your attention, and I look forward to engaging further in this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Eva, for your remarks. And last but definitely not least, on the far right here of the panel, Ms. Rashida Syed Othman, the acting chief executive of the National Cybersecurity Agency of Malaysia. Rashida, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you, UNIDIR, and also the distinguished panel that I have here. After hearing the three earlier panels elaborating about the usefulness, I can totally second and relate to everything that they say. But a few things that I think I would like to highlight here about the initiative that being done with regards to this is how coming from the domestic, we can actually use the tools. The way I see it, that this initiative, this report actually is connecting the dots, meaning that at national level, in Malaysia, we actually have had an ecosystem to manage cybersecurity. I mean, it has already existed since when we actually embarked into our digitalization journey. But again, we have heard the three distinguished panel just now mentioned about how this tool can be used or implemented with regards to element of international peace and security. So the way I see it is, at national level, coming from the domestic agency that is responsible to formulate, coordinate, and monitor cybersecurity, we need to look into cybersecurity as an organizational or sectoral issues, it is a technical issues that need to be mitigated. And this is not only international peace and security issues, it is also domestic issues, it is also social and economy issue that is fundamental pillar for the progress of a country. Secondly, is when cybersecurity as national security issues, where the elements of the need for any cybersecurity incidences that escalate into the element of pure national or traditional national security element, or any cybersecurity incidences escalate into something that will affect your financial, national financial or economic, or even the national image, which one of the example you give is the DDoS attack, when it will actually broke down the system, or it will cut off the availability of the government capability to function if it's a government portal that gives services to the government, and also to some extent if one incidences can escalate to the public health and safety. So coming back to another element that at national level we need to do is the one that we have spoken today, which about the norms and whatnot, that really closely related to international peace and security. So coming back to all these three things, I think at national level, what an agency like us can do is to really work together with Ministry of Foreign Affairs, that actually, or the diplomats that work with regards to the elements of international peace and security, and complement of what the initiative that we've been doing when cybersecurity was an IT issue, was just an IT issue to support the development of a country, where IT used to be utilities rather than IT becoming the fundamental pillar of a country. Coming back to this element, how I can see that this report will assist Malaysia in terms of making sure that the elements of complementing the fabric of cybersecurity as international peace and security issue is when Eva mentioned about the resiliency. Because the way we look at national level is cyber resilience strategies. We need to have cyber resilient strategies in order for us to enhance in terms of digital transformation. So that is two elements. Why we did that is because some of the investment in terms of strengthening our cybersecurity at national level need to be associated with the dollar and cents, what you can gain in terms of economy. But at the same time, if you can actually connect the dots of the roles of a state, in this regard, Malaysia, to adhere to the framework of responsible state behaviour, if you look into the norm, it needs to be implemented at national level. So connecting the dots and as well as giving an empathy to the stakeholder, then you can making sure that when you do the cybersecurity as a fabric of digital transformation, you actually can embed the things that UNIDIR has translated into something that is what Gabriel mentioned about, it's easy to read. So when I started, personal experience, when I started to work into the norms, I have no idea how it relates to it. Then as I learn and engage, oh, this is something that we've been doing since the past 15 or 10 years, but we cannot relate that. So that was the experience that I had. And I'm doing policy and strategy at national level. So when I am here, it's a classic example. Everyone would say I'm technical person. When I am within the technical people, they say, you're not technical enough. So I'm neither there nor here. But I think this is the role a national cybersecurity agency should play, where we actually can understand the technical matters and empathy to the technical people. Because let me share the experience. They don't want to read this report. They don't want to. They have so many problems that they need to mitigate in terms of incident handling, forensic and whatnot. But one thing that we need to connect the dot is by understanding on their part, by understanding the technical matters that they actually juggling with, and translate that into national policy and coordination. For example, let me go just one simple example from the report that you mentioned in terms of scenario. If one cybersecurity incident happened at national level, a national cybersecurity agency, whichever, we have National Cyber Coordination and Command Center that is called NC4 as well. So that was established since 2016 and operationalized, that connect the private and private and government sector that is designated as CNII. They actually have an access to report and incidences. So if one incident happened, for example, in a financial sector, a bank can actually report an incident. So at national level, at National Cybersecurity Agency, we need to coordinate and also distinguish the incidences, whether it is an incident that come from the normal hackers, from the criminals that actually have the motivations of dollar and cents. So we will straight away coordinate at national level and probably escalate that to the law enforcement agencies and also the incident handling part in order to mitigate the incident as soon as possible. But at the same time, if the incidences is something that can be associated or something that is related to the threat actor, that specifically have the element of espionage or any nation state actor, there are other protocols that we need to follow. So this is the tools that UNIDIR will provide the elements of the protocol when any incidences can escalate to the element of international peace and security. So one last thing that I would want to relate to these deliverables is the element of three things that you mentioned, which is threat and risk assessment, framework analysis, and foundational cyber capabilities. So let me go back to the threat and risk assessment. It's just exactly the other side of how the technical people, I would say, or the Chief Information Security Officer tackle cybersecurity incidences where there is already an accepted framework that is called NIST. I think everyone knows that, which calls about the identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover, which is a framework that's been used by most of all information security professionals. And right now, even the framework is under the revision, under the NIST. They want to put the element of govern. So coming back to the fundamental core of discussions that we had today, what we really wanted to do is to ensure that states can understand and also identify the gap at national level in order for us to properly prepare and determine what are the areas of capability that we need, where some states may already have that, but they don't know. They never realized that. So with this report, it actually will make sense. And the role of representative from capital that, like me, is to connect the dots, work together with our foreign ministries, and work together with the stakeholder at national level and complement that. So I'm going to stop here.
Thank you so much, Rashida, also to you for your great words and kind words. I think you really hit the nail on the head when you said that what we really wanted to achieve with this report was to demonstrate that implementing the framework and investing in the implementation of the framework isn't an effort that is just for itself. I mean, it ultimately increases national cyber resilience, which really connecting the two worlds that have at times been separated artificially is very useful. I'm very conscious of the time, and we need to release you to go back to the to the main room, and we would like to give you time to have at least a cup of coffee. So I would just apologize with the audience. If you have any comments or questions, please, let's transfer that to the cafe just outside of the room, and we can continue. But before we close, I just wanted to give the chance to Matthew. I don't know if you have anything you would like to say based on what you've heard or not. That's absolutely fine. I just want to close the meeting before coming back to you.
No, just to say thank you very much for the reports and the presentation, and to the other panelists. I took a huge amount from each of them. but particularly connected with the comments from Malaysia and this idea of being in between the technical and the policy, and also having to use work like this as leverage within our own systems to get things done and create incentives. And I took a lot of advice from your remarks, so thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I wish you a great rest of the day and a successful week. So thank you.